Hello and welcome back to the Widow podcast. This week I have a super lovely lady, Jo Betz, with me today to talk about her story through widowhood. Jo is absolutely gorgeous. You're going to love her. If you don't already follow her on Instagram at jo.betz, she shares her story very openly, but also very positively, because Jo is very passionate about giving grief a voice. And Jo is a widow herself. She is a mum, and she is also the writer of the journal Grief, which is absolutely fantastic. And we'll talk about this in our conversation. But Jo, hello. Thank you so much for coming along and chatting to us.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm actually really excited to be here and I guess share my experiences with your wonderful audience.
Yeah, do you know, you do it. We were just chatting, weren't we, about how positive and smiley, and just the energy that you have is so warm and nourishing. It's so lovely. You know, every time I see you on Instagram, I have a smile on my face. And I think you just offer so much hope and wisdom and that positivity, you know, that optimism amongst some very dark and heavy times for people, which is important because we need that, don't we? You know, it's, yes, we have to acknowledge the pain and the heartache and the hurt, but we've also, I think, got to try and find what's still good and hold on to that to pull us through, because it is really hard, really painful. But should we start with your story, just for those that maybe don't know, but of how your husband Craig died and what happened to you?
Yeah, absolutely, Karen. So I was widowed in 2017, so coming up almost 5 years ago. And look, Craig's death was very sudden. Basically, you know, it had a very normal day. Both of us at work had dinner and gone to bed, and about 2:30 in the morning, Craig woke me up telling me that he couldn't breathe. And it was, look, I could almost tell instantly, sorry, it was like an emergency situation. And I think within a couple of minutes, he had collapsed in our ensuite bathroom. So I was straight on the phone to Triple O, you know, then told to start resuscitation on him, which I did for about 20 minutes, I think, before paramedics arrived, and they took over and worked on Craig for about 1 hour before he was pronounced, dead from an asthma attack. So it all happened very suddenly, very quickly. And I guess it's safe to say it was a pretty traumatic experience. And I think I came out of that just completely spinning, like we all do when we lose someone, as though your whole world has crashed down around you, scared about the future, not really sure, you know, what was going to be in store for me when it came to grief and dealing with the trauma side of things. So yeah, it's been a crazy journey, and it's really lovely to do things like this, to actually then reflect on the last almost 5 years, to sort of see what's happened and how my thoughts have changed, particularly when it comes to grief.
You know, I think that's so interesting, isn't it, that how our story changes as we move through it. And you know, you can't see it at the beginning, can you, that the story will change and you'll be telling it differently and you'll be feeling it and experiencing it differently. You just can't apprehend that comprehend that at the beginning. And it's, as you move through it and you reflect back, like you say, you really see the differences in how you are with it and how you carry that, I suppose, and tell that story.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, so much my perspective on grief has changed from the very beginning, and feeling like, my goodness, I was going to be stuck here forever, to now, I guess, sitting in a place where I've got a lot more acceptance, and I guess in a way I've kind of embraced what has happened to me. And yeah, and feeling it's really important to share, you know, my experience or your experience with others as well, because I think it's really helpful to hear other personal experiences.
Do you look for that in your your grief? So, you know, after Craig died and you were thrown into this world that you didn't know, you didn't understand, full of fear, did you then go out looking for other widows to tell you their stories for hope?
Yeah, and I think I went mad basically. You know, in those first weeks and months, like your brain is just out of control. And I felt like I was in a vortex of, mainly at nighttime when I couldn't sleep, and of just Googling, looking for stories, looking for, you know, hope, knowledge, etc. And it was, yeah, it was full on. But also really scared initially to approach other widows. I don't know why. I think I was scared initially that if I reached out to someone, they might say, oh, no, I'm in a good space now and I don't want to hear from you, from someone who's obviously in such early stages of it and feeling probably so down and out about it. But now being, you know, a little bit further from that experience, I realized that when people reach out to me, I love sharing my experiences as time has gone on. And I guess offering that hope in a way that I was looking for. But goodness me, I would hate for someone to have checked my Google history at that time of the things that I was searching for.
That's so funny, isn't it? I think we were all sort of frantically searching the internet, aren't we, for answers?
Anything. And I think that was it. I was just looking for the answer. And I realized now that that was probably my whole, I guess, problem with grief initially, is that I'm quite a problem solver when it comes to life in general. So after Craig's death, I was like, well, I've got a huge problem, but I'm pretty sure I can solve it. And I was going to solve my way through grief. So I still remember, you know, instantly within a few days of his death, having my sister Google the stages of grief for me and reading them out and trying to work out where I was at. I mean, mind you, I was 2 or 3 days into this journey and kind of, you know, but almost looking at that and going, well, that's given me a checklist that I can work through. And I thought, I reckon I can do that in a year. I reckon I'll absolutely have nailed that list by then. I was so very, very wrong. And I look back on that and I feel sorry for that, Jo. Like, I feel sad for me that I was searching for these answers and I was searching for that healing that really, in the end, was just going to be a matter of time and learning and growth until I could get to a better place. But my God, I tried.
Totally resonate with that, just from my perspective, and just, you know, all of the people I work with in their grief, you know, especially those first couple of years, you want the answer, you want to fix the problem. Like, how do I get out of this pain? When's it going to end? Where's the end point? When am I going to figure out who I am, where I belong, where my place is in the world? You know, and I remember asking people, like, how long did it take you? Like, when did you feel okay again? Like, when did you figure out what job you were going to do? When did you meet someone else? When did you get married? Like, because I needed like dates, and like when I got to that date myself and I was like, oh, well, I haven't done that means I'm doing it wrong.
I know.
They did it, why haven't I done it?
And I think the big one for me was the 1 year anniversary. So I'd worked really hard across that year thinking that I'd done all the stages of grief. I think of anger, I'd been a little bit angry initially, but enough for me to think I'd tick that off my list. And I did the first year anniversary and I was away with friends, and on the actual day, you know, like it can often be, it wasn't as bad as perhaps the build up and the lead up was. So I thought, well, this is great. Grief and I are perhaps done. And then probably about 5 days later or something, I think I'd gone home and I was exhausted. Like, it is exhausting, those anniversaries and those milestones. And I remember waking up and just thinking, God, it's the same shit. Like, I still feel bad. And I thought I must be doing grief wrong. And I felt like over those next few months, I really unraveled in a way like I hadn't done before. And then I got angry, and then I got really, really angry. And I then, like, it was like I'd almost taken what I thought was 10 steps forward to take probably 17 steps back. I just was all over the place. And I think that's where I began to work through my grief a little bit more, but also start to understand that, you know, as we all say, is not the linear checklist or process that we thought it was going to be. And that grief has more stages than just 5. You know, there's all kinds of emotions that we experience in grief that aren't even touched on, you know, from things like, I guess, jealousy, frustration, all kinds of things can surface when we're grieving someone that we love so much who has died. And yeah, and I think I eventually just got to a point where I was thinking, I now have to surrender to this, and I have to surrender to all the emotions as much as I don't want to, and just go with it. And I think that's when I started to fare a little bit better in my grief, was once I'd embraced it.
Yeah. Do you know, it's so true, isn't it? It is really learning to live with it rather than try and get over it, solve it. It's inviting it in and understanding that, you know, it's not something you move on from. You kind of move with it and you bring it with you, and it's a companion for life. But in order for it to not be a heavy weight for you, it's building that relationship. You know, I talk very much in my groups and stuff about building that relationship with your grief, getting to know it, getting to understand it, and you know, the peaks and flows of it all. But also it is an umbrella term, isn't it? You know, I think sometimes, like exactly like you say, we think of grief, we want to know, like, how do we tick it off? What have I got to go through to get through this grief? You have your 5 stages, or you know, 7, or whatever it is people kind of find and draw from. But then you do very quickly realize, don't you, actually there's so much more to this than meets the eye.
Yeah, and it's so layered and it's so complex, and it's such an individual journey as well. And so there might be some people that experience that array of emotions early and embrace it a little bit earlier, that you know, might fare better in the years to come. And there'll be people like me that probably try and shun it for that first year to year and a half, unravel, and then go, oh, I get it now. Okay, I'll go with it. But you know what, we're all experiencing, each death and each relationship, whether that's the loss of partners or not, is so unique to the person that's experiencing that. In saying that, there's nothing like, I guess, meeting another person who's grieving and feeling like they actually get it. So as much as it's a unique journey, I think you come out of it with a really great understanding of how painful the experience of death can be. And I think you develop a whole new level of empathy for others too.
Definitely. You know, I think I feel so much more deeply than I used to. And you know, when you see that raw pain in someone, you know, especially in those very early days, it can really take you right back, can't it, to that despair, that devastation, that feeling of my life is over. I am never going to be the same. It's never going to be. And of course it isn't, and you're not. But in those moments, that's really scary because you don't know what's on the other side of this.
Absolutely. And that was a big one for me. I remember seeking the help of a psychologist, and pretty quickly after Craig had died, because the problem solver in me was like, right, I know the things I should be doing. And I think in our first session, I was beside myself because I didn't want it to change me. And that was obviously a massive fear for me that I didn't realize that I had, because, you know, the Jo prior to Craig's death, upbeat, positive, vibrant. And I just was really scared that I was going to turn into someone that would be completely jaded by the experience, and I'd be negative, and I'd be the one, you know, at every conversation saying, you know, something like, well, at least you've got a husband, if anyone dare, you know, said anything spiteful about their own. I just had these visions that could potentially be me. And she just said to me, this is going to change you. And I was so resistant to it. But now I realize, like, of course I was going to change. There was no way that I couldn't not change out of this experience. But at the same time too, I think I've changed in some really amazing ways that I didn't expect from this at all.
And that's so powerful, isn't it? And I can really kind of understand that, because I was exactly the same. I remember saying a few days after Simon died, like, this isn't going to change me. I'm absolutely 100%. I'm going to stay who I am. I'm not going to allow this to change me, because like you, I thought if I allowed it to change me, I would end up becoming like a bitter, angry, miserable widow that didn't like life, was just didn't want to know about anything. Everything was about why me. And
Yes,
I was
exactly.
adamant. I was like, no, because if I change, it's going to be bad. But actually fighting that change was exhausting, absolutely exhausting. And I was clinging on to things because that was who I was. But it was bringing me so little joy.
Yeah.
And I felt so heavy trying to carry that. And eventually when I realized, allow the changes, accommodate the changes, change doesn't mean it's going to be bad. And I think we very much have that feeling, don't we, of changes and differences are bad. I think we struggle with thinking they're good, because we naturally go to the bad, don't we, with our minds. We go to the negative side of things. But allowing those changes to happen and accepting, I suppose, that it is going to change you, but it can have some very positive changes as well, and it can reveal parts of you that you never knew existed, that are going to make you feel so proud of who you are at your core, that's quite an uplifting feeling for someone, I think.
I agree. And it's funny, it's just making me think too that the whole fear about being jaded or negative, or that dark kind of space that you can find yourself in. I would say the biggest change for me, or within me, has kind of been, I am much the same as you. I'm far more emotional than I ever was. But I love that about myself now. I love that I feel a range of emotions, whether and they shouldn't be deemed as negative emotions, because I think, when you're feeling dark or down and out, there's obviously a reason behind that. And that's just part of what you're going through at that time. You'll move out of it, of course, but you can embrace those side of yourself too. And I often laugh because I can sometimes, especially when it's leading up to milestones, feel like, oh yeah, I'm going into a crazy period of time. Now I'm going to be emotionally rocky. So family and friends, watch out. I give them a bit of a warning. But I used to be embarrassed by it, whereas now I'm just a little bit like, that's just part of who I am. And I like that I'm a layered kind of person when it comes to my emotions. And I don't think we have to always deem that as a bad thing. It's like that's something that has been, I guess, taught to us, and we, that we must be happy and positive at all times. But I think there's a real beauty in the different levels of emotions that we feel too.
There is. And, I always say to people, you can't have one without the other. Can you? You can't experience happiness and love without like sadness and grief. Like that, you've got to have the two sides of the coin to know what each one is.
Absolutely. And I often just go back to that. I think about after Craig had died and what I went through in all those months, and still go through at various times. Oh God, it's the worst I have ever felt. Like I mentally, emotionally, physically, like so bad. That for me now, as you said, the opposite end of the spectrum is that when I feel joy, then I go, yes, that's what I want as well. So you're right. You can't have one without the other. But I think that depth of pain has given me a real appreciation for those moments of joy, and is really what I'm trying to seek as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, 100%. It's just finding that joy in life, because I think when you lose someone so young and so close and so quickly, you really realize how fragile life is, don't you? And how quickly it can I mean, in a split second, your life can change so drastically. And it is trying to be more present, isn't it, in the moments that you have, and finding the joy in them, and doing the things that light you up. But that's hard when you're in the midst of grief, isn't it, to find those moments. But to your point, we don't have to be happy and positive all the time. And like I try and explain to my clients that being positive doesn't mean that you're always happy and you're always looking on the bright side. It's sometimes it's okay, I'm feeling awful right now and this is absolutely horrendous, and I don't know what to do with myself. But that positivity comes in of, I'm just going to keep going, I'm just going to take the next step, and eventually I'll find my way. And that's where the positivity comes in. But it's not always kind of outwardly looking like you're happy and upbeat and, oh, it's okay, I've got this type thing. It's embracing what is, isn't it, and allowing it all to be.
Yes, and I think that's a really great point, because I think I was just, almost like picturing myself going on those days where you just are lying in bed going, oh God, is this it? And you're feeling bad. It's having that inner faith in yourself going, do you know what? Today is a bad day and I might write that off, but it doesn't mean tomorrow won't be better. And it might even the next day might not be better. It might be another week or so, but having that inner faith in yourself that this, won't feel like this forever is part of, I guess, having that positive sort of feeling and going, I will eventually be okay.
Yeah, 100%. It comes back to this too shall pass, isn't it? But that equally works in your up moments, doesn't it? In your moments of joy.
Yes.
And it's kind of, we all want to bottle those moments, don't you? Like, I just want to stay here in this moment. Like, I don't want this to end because I just feel so happy. But that passes as well. And life happens and grief comes, or something goes on in our lives. And we come back down again, and it's allowing those moments, though, because what we often find in grief, and what I see with a lot of my clients in my groups, when we get those kind of moments when we can come up for air and we feel a little bit lighter, we then tell ourselves that we're doing it wrong, we're being disloyal, I can't possibly feel happy, what will everyone think, I shouldn't be enjoying this moment, nobody can see me laughing. Yes. And we stop ourselves from having that because we layer it with all this stuff, and it's kind of accepting that that's okay too. Like grief doesn't always look like sadness and pain and anger and resentment and tears. You can be in the depths of grief. I mean, I personally created some incredible moments in the depths of my grief. I have some memories that will stay with me forever that I cherish. I was hurting, I was desperately hurting, but I was still able to make some wonderful memories with my girls.
Yes.
And it is, I guess that's the duality of it, isn't it? It's both.
It really is. Both. And you're absolutely right, because it kind of makes me even think back to that first year that was so painful, but some of the amazing pockets of joy that I found too. And I remember even being on a boat with Heidi. We were going from one side of Victoria to the other side, and I was having a bad morning, and I just, when we got up to the top of this boat, the sun was shining, we saw some dolphins and they were jumping, and I felt good, and I surprised myself. I was like, oh, okay, I feel good. But it was enough for me to go, oh, that's a good feeling. Like, I hope I can feel that again soon, and wanting to feel that way as well when I could became really important to me, and still really is for me. I think life has become about finding pockets of joy wherever I can, and particularly in the really simple stuff, whether that's watching my daughter play netball. She played her first netball match the other week, and I was just on the sidelines going, this is magic. Like, this is so great to be watching the joy on her face and feeling that for myself, and thinking this is really what life is all about. It's the simple moments, being with family, being with friends, doing stuff that you said that lights you up or makes you feel good is really important.
It is. And I think, like you say, when you're watching Heidi play netball, it's, I'm here, I can do this, and knowing that our husbands would do anything to be there in that moment, because those moments are so special, aren't they?
Yes. And it's interesting you say that, because then I kind of go, that's an interesting shift for me, because I always think about in that first year or two, almost anything Heidi did, I probably felt sad because I was like, oh, I wish Craig was here. And I still, look, don't get me wrong, feel that. But I think now I focus a bit more on, oh my God, how lucky am I that I'm here to witness this? And there'll always be that sadness within me, but I can see that shift of kind of, rather than sort of moping my way through it, and that I'm saying to go, well, I want to embrace this as well, which, look, as I said, in those first year or two and those first kind of milestones, of course, you're going to feel bloody shit for having them missing out and wanting them there. And I'm sure, you know, when Heidi goes off to high school or gets married, there's going to be a deep, deep sadness within that for us both. But I think there's a real, I feel incredibly lucky that I'm here. And I actually was having a conversation earlier with my daughter Heidi, who's now 8. So she was 4 when Craig passed away, and she asked me what I was doing tonight, and I said, I'm talking on a podcast about grief. And I said, you know what grief is? And she was like, yes, it's, you know, it's the feelings, you have, like sadness and anger and things. I said, yeah, that's right, it is feelings, you know, about what you have when someone dies. I said, but it's more, it doesn't just have to be sadness and anger, there can be happiness too. And I could see this look on confusion on her face going, I don't know, isn't it? It goes back to that, what we deem to be, I guess, bad or negative emotions. I said, no, because you can feel happy in grief as well. And she's like, oh, but what? And I said, well, I feel happy that we're here. Like, how lucky are we? And we have times of happiness. We still grieve and we still feel those sad feelings too. But it can also be joyful, and you can also feel happiness too. So it was a really interesting conversation that I just had with her this evening.
I love that. I love that you had that with her, and you know, normalize that for her, because, you know, ultimately we are their role models in it, aren't we? And it's having those conversations so that they understand that it's okay to be happy, it's okay to be sad, it's okay, and everything in between is okay. Nothing's bad, nothing's negative, like you say, everything just is. And allowing what is to be, and we move through it all. And it might take longer than you want it to take, or longer than you expect it to take, but we keep moving. And I think there is an element of making conscious decisions in that help you to move through it in more positive ways. But it's just keep taking those steps, allowing what is to be, and not sort of judging and criticizing it all, and thinking that you're doing it wrong all the time.
Yes.
So with Heidi then, she was 4 at the time. I mean, did she know what was going on in the middle of the night when her dad had all that? Did she wake up?
So I was incredibly lucky. No, Heidi didn't wake up. Interestingly, she was in our bed that night, you know, as kids always are. So she was actually only probably 4 or 5 meters away. To be honest, I have no idea how she slept through it. It was really scary for me, because I think I felt like when I was attempting to resuscitate Craig that I was being so loud. And at one point I went to open the door for the paramedics and I couldn't see her in our bed. And I think what had happened was I'd just thrown the covers over or something. And so at the point where I'd opened up the door for paramedics, but they hadn't arrived yet, I was just doing it on the instruction of 000. I think there was a good 10 minutes, or in the back of my head, I was like, I don't know where Heidi is. And I thought, oh my God, is she wandering around the house? Has she gone out on the street? Anyway, I was able to find her in our bed and actually shift her down to her bedroom without waking whilst they worked on Craig. And so she missed the whole thing, which I'm very grateful for, because it just, my head, and as anyone who's been through a situation like that, was completely out of control. And I mean, we had the undertakers come and collect Craig's body before she woke up. So that was a decision that I'd made. So yeah, with a death at home, they have to get the police in there and things like that too. So I'd spoken to a really lovely policewoman who just said to me, I'm mindful that you've got a young daughter here. Do you think we should remove his body before she wakes? And yeah, I didn't know what I was going to say to her. And I think I just needed time to collect myself. So we actually had Craig's body taken, and when she woke up in the morning, I made the decision to actually just let her get on with her normal day, which was at kinder, so that I had time to prepare myself to break that news. So at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, about 12 hours later, I relayed the news. And look, I think I made the right decision in the end. I just wasn't in a state to have done it any kind of justice. It's the most appalling thing to do, isn't it? Telling children that they've lost their dad. But yeah, it was, I don't know, I was talking about this with someone the other day, because at the time I remember someone saying to me, do you think she knows what's happened, or that has she really comprehended that Craig has died? And I got really defensive. I was like, well, of course she understands. Like, I told her dad had died. She cried. I'm upset. Everyone's upset. So I was like, I think she understands what's happened here. I mean, we hadn't experienced death. It's certainly not for her at that age, being only 4. But about, I don't know, 6 months later, we were driving and she said to me, so when's dad coming back? And I was floored and was like, oh my goodness. I said, no, Heidi. And, I'm pretty open and honest with her. I think what I didn't understand at that time was, for a 4-year-old, that concept of permanence, like it just hadn't developed in her yet. Even 2 years ago, she made an off-the-cuff comment one Easter, a little bit like about dad coming back. And I thought, goodness, like she cognitively is still trying to process. She's 8 now, she definitely understands. But that was something that really, I guess, shocked and surprised me, that for children, that there's age levels that they actually don't really truly understand what has happened, and it takes time for that to happen. And then that their grief will continue to evolve like ours does. But there's something inside me that sort of feels like her grief might probably get a little bit worse before it not gets better, because it doesn't ever get better. But I think perhaps the gravity of that loss will start to hit home maybe a little bit later, as they start to understand and experience the world a little bit more without a father in their life. So it'll be an interesting journey, I think.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because like you say, that their cognitive development in terms of what they understand of things changes so much, doesn't it, as they grow.
Yes.
And when they lose someone they love very early, the concept of death, the finality of it, like, I mean, I'm not being funny, I find it really hard. I remember when Simon died, it's like, what is that? Is it what he's never going to walk? You can't get your head around it. Like, you're just looking at the door thinking, surely they're going to walk in it in a minute.
Yes.
Like, so and I'm fairly cognitively developed, I think. So you kind of you have to expect our children to understand that and make sense of it. Like, they're not going to, are they? It's so hard for us as adults, but it does change, it does evolve. And I think, my children, they were 9 and 5 when Simon died, and definitely now, it's over 5.5 years, and I'm seeing a lot of changes, especially sort of in my eldest daughter. I don't talk about it a lot because it's not my story to tell, and obviously it's she's aware of what I do and listens to things, and I think it's not fair, but it does come up in different ways and rear its head, and it's something that is lifelong, isn't it? That they're going to have different times in their lives when it affects them in different ways, depending on their understanding, their experiences, what they're doing, the situations in life, and it's helping them in the best way that you can, isn't it? And keeping those lines of communication open. And it's just so hard though, isn't it? Because you want to solve it all for them as a parent. You want to take all their pain away, and you can't.
Absolutely. And I think it's so tough on grieving parents who are grieving themselves, but then I feel a huge responsibility for Heidi's grief, because you'd be the same, we're the role models that they've got as such, and it's you're trying to navigate that together, so it's almost like you're in charge of 2 different griefs. And yeah, I've found it an interesting journey with Heidi. I'd say at this stage, how does she handle? I mean, Heidi is an absolute little joy. Like, she, much the same as me, loves smiling, loves having fun, joy, 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 give me more, more, more. But she's, what I find interesting is she'll talk to me about it. She doesn't talk about it with really anyone else. I'd be interested to know, I'm sure like a few of her friends know that her dad has died, and whether that's because their parents have told them or whether they've been to our house and kind of got the concept that there's no dad here. But I've had quite a few occasions, and you know what kids are like. I've had occasions where kids will be like, where's the dad? You're like, oh my goodness. And I always give Heidi the opportunity and say, well, do you like to tell them? Oh no, she definitely doesn't. Like, almost like she's a little bit embarrassed. And I think there's this, you know, and we're all the same at that age. You're desperate to fit in. You want to be the same as everyone else. And I think for her, she finds it a bit of this is making me stand out a little. But I mean, to look at her, you just go, that's a perfectly normal, happy, functioning child. But at the same time too, as I said, you've got this awareness that like things will evolve and change. And I think initially when after Craig had died, I was like, look at me, I am a pro, this child is great. And then she's like, well, when's dad coming back? I'm like, oh my God, she has missed the whole point. So I think, I'm sure as soon as I think I've got a handle on things will change. But I think for me, my approach with Heidi has just always been honesty to the level she can understand or wants to understand, and talking about emotions. And, you know, that same thing that it's a whole lot of emotions, Heidi, and none of them have to be bad or good. It just, you know, this is just how grief is and how it plays out, and then it's okay to be sad. And I think a lot of sometimes if she'd come home from school, I might sort of say to her, you know what, I've had a really bad day and I feel sad, and this is the reason why, and that's just kind of part of it. And she sort of looks at me oddly and says, oh, all right, Mum. And off she goes. So, and I think it's just, we've kind of, I guess, learned to adapt it our own way and work together with each other. I mean, we talk a lot, and it's just, as I said, I think we're just navigating, muddling our way through it. Probably once again, initially I was like, how do I problem solve this? But I've learned to let go and just go, look, we'll just deal with things as they come up.
Yeah, I think that's such a good approach in life, isn't it? Really, just
it really is.
We're always trying to foresee the problems and the challenges we're going to be facing and what we're going to do about them. But actually, let's just get through this now, deal with this. And I think one of my biggest learnings has been, you know, like, I can deal with uncertainty. I'm not saying I'm good at it. I'm not saying it's fun, or that I have the answers, but whatever comes up, we'll figure it out somehow, you know, in some way. And it might not always be immediately obvious how we do that. But it is that just coming together. And I don't know about you, but I do feel a lot closer to my girls than I think I would have done if Simon had lived. And, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, that's better than if he had lived and
thank
we were.
Goodness.
But that's not what I'm saying. But there's definitely a closeness, a bond, a togetherness that that kind of unspoken, I guess, connection. You know, when you've been through something so traumatic together and seen each other at their worst, I don't know, and maybe just a greater appreciation for what you have. I mean, I just took everything for granted so much before.
I agree. And one thing I would say and I'm probably being too hard on myself, but at the same time, I'm not proud of the kind of parent I was for that first year or two after Craig had died. I was all over the place. And, you know, here I was probably knowing I need to give Heidi stability, but if anything, it was like I was completely unstable. And I think when Craig died, our relationship shifted and changed, and almost an element of her going, oh my God, mum's lost it. And so how do I trust her and trust the world and what's going on? I'm not trusting of the world because it's all been upended. And in a way, I was really resentful about being a single parent at the start. But interestingly, then what happened was, I think, and it was probably good timing. I mean, things became a little bit more stable when Heidi started school, but with COVID and then being in lockdown together and just the two of us, I think she was getting the stability that she needed. I was probably getting the stability I craved but wasn't creating at that time.
Yes.
And what has happened is this really beautiful bond between us and a level of understanding and connection that has been so wonderful and amazing. And I do think, and I don't just think that's COVID, I think it's just been a time thing. I think it's just taken me time to get back up on my feet, as we all do. And, you know, coming into this new identity and persona, I guess, as well, to then develop this really beautiful relationship with Heidi that I am now really proud of.
That's so lovely. And do you know, it really does shine through in what you share on Instagram. You know, she's just a little mini you, isn't she?
She is. Gorgeous. It is a worry. It's like we are morphing into one another. So both wonderful, but also concerning.
Oh, it is. It's so lovely to see, and that bond definitely kind of shines through, doesn't it? It's lovely. I mean, you kind of touched on there about identity, and this is huge, I think, isn't it, in widowhood? How we discover who we are after our person has died. You know, so many people are lost with that and where they're heading in life. How have you dealt with that in your grief?
With identity, I think, as I said, it was interesting. I think initially that was that resistance. I didn't want to change. And then I think just came a level of acceptance that I have changed, but I've changed in some great ways that probably wouldn't have happened had I not been through the experience that I have, or that we all have. And I think it's simple stuff that I've changed, as I was saying. I think more emotional, but in a really wonderful way, a level of, like, I guess, empathy for others. I think I've had to, and as you do when you're on your own, you have to really trust yourself and start making decisions on your own. And that really, you know, for anyone that's perhaps experiencing this, I was so bad at making decisions for that first year or two because I was used to making decisions with a partner there. And when they're taken away from you, you know, it's a huge, overwhelming responsibility. But with time and practice and trusting myself, I now, you know, am proud that I have become a decision maker, and that I know who I am now, and I know what makes me feel good. I know what makes me smile. I know what brings me joy. I know a little bit better how to handle those painful and hard times, which unfortunately I only learn by going through them. Then you resurface again and then you go back through it again. But I think each time it doesn't always get easier, but I think you have better strategies to cope, or you understand what you need at that time too. And so I think I've seen almost Craig's death as in, and I'm not sure if you feel the same, Karen, but it was like I had been knocked over and everything taken away from me, and I'd been stripped right back to nothing, basically. So this has been a time to rebuild myself and my identity, and to, if you can see it in that light, go, this is an opportunity to rebuild myself into the kind of person I really want to be. And I think that is through things like being more present, being more empathetic, you know, experiencing joy and all those kind of things. So I think, as I said, you would never wish this, you would hope that this wouldn't happen, but wow, what an incredible opportunity to rebuild.
Yeah. Totally. You know, I think I very much, through my own journey and what I try and help others do now, is, you know, we talk a lot about finding ourselves, don't we? And kind of who are we really? But actually for me, I very much, when I shifted that thought from finding myself to creating the person I want to become, it just felt more empowering. And really, you know, like thinking, okay, so how do I want to show up in life? What's important to me? What feels good? What values do I, you know, want to uphold? And then going about kind of living that, and then you just become that, don't you? And it is hard, and it does take a long time. And I personally think you have to kind of work at it a little bit. It's I mean, but it is time as well. It's both.
It's such a process, isn't it? And I really like that you said the word values, because I actually did a task last year just around, looking at what values are important to me. And I think things came up that I hadn't perhaps thought of. Like, I now realize that stability is important to me. Like, it doesn't mean that I can't cope with change or whatever, but I need a solid base. Otherwise I get a bit rocky. But things like that, adventure is really important to me. And so I need to lead a life where I can create adventure for myself. Now that could be it could be, I'm not saying, it could be huge things like going, I'm going to climb Kilimanjaro, which is never going to happen for me at all. And I have no interest, but that adventure for me might be going for a hike for an hour or two. It could be going into the city of Melbourne, like simple stuff that I go, but that's just creating a sense of adventure. And that's a value that is important to me. So I think it's an opportunity. I never thought about values before.
No,
like
I hadn't.
I never had, whereas it's become a really big part of my life now.
I'm currently kind of reassessing mine, because I hadn't either, and I'd never thought of my values. No, I didn't even know what they were. With somebody, I was like, what do you mean? Like, I kind of understood, but not really. And then I did my own, but that was about 2.5 years after Simon died when I started on my journey. And obviously now I'm sort of 5.5, nearly 6, and I can feel there's been a shift. There's been a shift in my values from then to now, and it's something we kind of, not huge, but I definitely like challenges. You know, this, I never would have said this before, but since Simon died, I've been challenged so many times, and I've challenged myself to do so many different things and overcome fears and do things I never thought I could do, which is scary, and it pushes me out of my comfort zone. But I love that feeling of achievement, of thinking, do you know what, I'm capable, I can do things I didn't think I can do. And I kind of like that little bit of a push. And like you, I'm not necessarily talking about maybe climbing Kilimanjaro, but you know, like we went paddle boarding, you know, and sometimes it's very simple kind of challenge, that they're not huge, that they're small, but just trying something different, doing something different, pushing yourself a little bit, and just I guess that little bit of sense of adventure as well, you know, that you're just not stuck in the mundane.
I was going to say, Karen, I love that, because probably where if you'd said to me I like challenges, I would be going, oh my God, no way. But I think after Craig died, I came out with an attitude of what's the worst that can happen. So I will give things a go, because I think, well, the worst, basically, well, I hope that's the worst thing that will happen to me has happened. So what's the worst that can happen if I try paddleboarding and I fall off, or whatever it might be? Of just pushing the envelope a little bit with what you're sort of, you know, comfortable enough with, but stepping outside of your comfort zone. But I think my care factor has gone down.
Yes.
A little bit too. I just go, do you know what? Give it a go. Like, I've done challenging things before, and I can do them again.
Exactly. And huge challenges. And I always kind of go back to, I think one of two of the hardest things I did in the aftermath of Simon dying was going to see him, because I wasn't with Simon when he died, so I went to see him a couple of days later in the funeral parlour, and that was just absolutely horrendous. It was one of the worst moments in my life. And the other one was walking away from him at the crematorium after the funeral. You know, I just with every fiber of my being, I didn't want to leave him there. You know, it was, even now, it just, and I think, do you know, if I can do those two things in life, like, I feel like I can do anything. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Okay, it might not work out. I might not be able to do it. I might get a bit wet. I don't know, but I kind of
absolutely.
have that mindset of, do you know, I feel like I've done some pretty awful things and I've faced them.
I think anyone who's lost a partner knows exactly what you're saying when it's that you do horrific things that you never thought you'd do, whether that's, you know, seeing someone die, not being with them and having that traumatic experience of them being gone, but not actually being there for it, of seeing their body, of funerals, like, oh my, when you really think about it, telling the kids that their father or mother has died, like, just they are the worst things that can happen. And you know, then the little stuff doesn't seem so big or challenging anymore.
So true. And do you know what, I always, like, telling my children was awful, and I almost feel a bit bad saying that those were the two moments and telling my children wasn't. And don't get me wrong, it was an awful moment, but I did it so quickly after I found out myself that he just died. I think I almost, it literally must have been about 20 minutes. You know, I was just almost on this autopilot. And it was awful, don't get me wrong, but I didn't have time to think about it too much beforehand. And there's pluses and minuses. I wanted to put it off. I wanted to. But I didn't have the opportunity, wasn't there for me, because they knew something was wrong because of, you know, what was going on at the time. But it is, it's just, that is an awful moment, but it's looking at your most awful moments, isn't it, and thinking, do you know, like, I've done that, I did that. And I'm still here. I'm still, like, and that's the thing, I just, well, when you're saying, you know, there's part of it that goes, will there always be an element of denial? Like, I think still my brain doesn't quite comprehend what has happened. Like, it's just you, and you're saying, expecting them to walk in the door, where I think sometimes I wonder whether one day someone will just tap me on the shoulder and go, actually, it's all right. You've learned some lessons and we're going to put you back into your old life. I know, it's weird.
It's just so hard to fathom. And I think that is, you know, and I found that interesting in my journey of grief, because I felt like, you know, particularly with a sudden death and a traumatic death, I don't think your brain can comprehend it or allows you to comprehend it, because I don't think you'd get back up again. So I feel like my brain in a way has been very kind to me over the years and just gives me a little bit, another little bit, and they hurt at the time, but almost I'm sort of walking around obliviously, and then I just get a little something, and it, you know, sort of slowly pulling those pieces together, because I just don't think any of us could cope if it all came at us at once.
Do you know what? I think that I just 100% believe that. And when I did David Kessler's grief education program, actually, that was something that came up there. And it's something that, you know, I truly believe as well, that our body, our brain, our mind, whatever, you know, will only allow you to feel so much pain at one moment, because you can't handle it all. If you were to process it all at once, like, it would just be too much, wouldn't it? And it already feels too much. And I think we, you know, people talk about feeling numb or not feeling enough, and actually, I've, you know, it's been a couple of months and I'm feeling okay, and it's always that, well, that's good, like, but it's going to come, you know, there's kind of no escaping it, but you will only be fed it in amounts that you can handle it at the time you're at. I think our body has a very clever way of protecting us almost, and allowing us to sift that in piece by piece, maybe, like you've just said, but that can make us feel bad as well, can't it? Because sometimes people do get to a certain point in their grief and go, well, I feel like I'm doing okay, actually, what's wrong with me, have I got this wrong? And you almost want to go, don't worry, it's all coming, but
it's still coming for you.
You haven't escaped it, it just might come a bit later. So you're not doing it wrong, it's just this is what you can deal with and what you can cope with right now. But it's just, it amazes me, two things, that how differently we all do it, but also how ill-equipped I think we are as human beings. And I've said this before to people, but the fact of the matter is, we live and we die. Like we are fundamentally here to procreate, to make new life, and then go. Like that's just how it's been forever. This isn't a new thing. Like, we are all going to die. Why can't we deal with it better? Why do we not understand it better? And I get that it's attached to love, and the depth of the grief is equal to the depth of the love. Like, but I don't know, I just feel like as human beings we're so ill-equipped to deal with it on so many levels.
And I guess maybe because it's almost like we're designed to sort of shun it in a way. And all of us would feel this sort of grieving. It's the reactions of family and friends that you don't expect, but you're an outpouring of this emotion, and then everyone just being so uncomfortable about it. Like, how are we not better at supporting each other? Look, I think once you've been through it, then you are. But it's interesting. It's like we are so uncomfortable talking about pain and suffering. And I tell you what, if people could do it more and openly and honestly, I think we'd be a hell of a lot better off for it. Because I think too, there's been a lot of times where I've second guessed myself with talking to people, because I'm like, well, I don't want to drag down their day. Like, and I know they're going to be uncomfortable, so I should just tell them what they want to hear. Oh, we're doing okay under the circumstances. We're doing okay. Like, that just seems to be the response that people want to hear, because that allows them to kind of get on with their day. So it's an interesting space, because you said it's just the reality of life, isn't it?
It is.
And I mean, look, I now reflect on what I was like with people who were grieving before I'd lost my husband, because I hadn't really experienced much death in my life. And I was appalling. Like, I was probably, or I would have been the one serving out those positive platitudes that everyone would have hated. Just, oh, things will be okay. Or just think positive. Like, oh my God, I would have been so frustrating. So look, I think it's certainly taught me a good lesson, but it's just, unbelievable. It was interesting because I was talking to my brother about this. So my dad passed away 3 months ago, and was saying it was interesting because when my grandmother died, and my dad had like a interesting relationship with his mother, as in, I think there'd been sort of harder times, but towards the end of her death, they'd come back and sort of reconnected and were close. But anyway, Dad came home and cried openly about my grandma, and anytime he talked about her, he always welled up, and because he just loved his mum. That's the way that relationship is between a mother and a child. And we were always like gobsmacked. Like, I think we probably as kids are running off giggling, going, Dad's crying again. But now I just go, what a beautiful display of grief. But we didn't understand that at that time. Like, it was good to see, but I think we don't always look at it in that way, as in going, now I can look at it and say, that what a beautiful display of grief. That's how much he loved his mum, despite whatever relationships and things that kind of gone on, that he would openly weep about his love for her and his feeling of pain or loss without her. So and not feel, and he never felt embarrassed about it, but my dad was very true to himself as well. So no shame with things like that too. Whereas I think a lot of us sometimes can feel shame with our emotion, but that's probably more so because we're scared about the reaction we'll get to.
100%, and I think that's so beautiful that your dad, especially for a man, was comfortable to do, because it is hard as a parent as well, isn't it, to show emotion in front of your children? Because I remember seeing my mum crying as a child, and I don't recall seeing my dad crying, but I remember seeing him very sad when they got divorced. And oh God, it broke my, as a child, I hated it. And I know, it's, you want to naturally protect your children from seeing you in that state, because you don't want them to feel that way. But actually, it's important to see that it's okay to be sad, it's okay to cry, it's okay to miss someone. Like, don't have shame around those feelings in life, because there is so much shame, and a lot of it is around, well, what will other people think of me, what will they say, it's going to be awkward and nobody's going to know what to do, and we don't know what to do, do we don't know what to do with sadness. And just holding space for somebody and just sitting with them in the darkness, rather than trying to shine a light on them, you know, and make everything okay. It's like, I'm here, I'll sit with you for as long as it takes. But we don't get that. We're not taught how to listen, how to support, how to love, how to nurture, and know that not everything needs a fix, a solution, an answer.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't come naturally to us. And
I think too, with the kids, it is a hard one, finding space to grieve, but whether you show them that emotion or not. And I'm not a big crier. You know, generally I know I'm on the tipping edge if I start really crying, sobbing. So probably Heidi hasn't seen much of that. It hasn't been necessarily me trying to hide it. It's just, and you know what, she probably distracts me. Kids, what a great distraction from what's really going on. But last year I hit yet another grief low, and we were lockdowns, all that kind of restrictions. It was, pretty horrendous. I'd just gone through the anniversary, and I just woke up one morning and I could feel it had been coming on for a couple of days, going, wow, I'm not emotionally good. Like, I'm in a really bad headspace. So I rang my parents, and despite restrictions, I was like, I need you to come here and just, you know, you just need a rational brain, because I just knew I wasn't feeling rational, and that I just needed someone to kind of talk me through it. Or, you know, with parents, just tell me you love me. That's going to be okay. That's what I need. But of course I had Heidi with me too. So we all met up, and, you know, I'm sobbing away, and, you know, after an hour or two, then, it was okay. But I remember, like, that night, sort of taking Heidi aside and saying to her, like, I know you must be worried about me, like, you must be, because she would never really see me in that state. I said, and I'm just really sad, and I'm just going through a really hard time at the moment, but I don't want you to be scared or worried. Things will get better. This is just sometimes things happen, and sometimes we just need to cry it all out. So just, I think it's just that sometimes you find that yourself, and so it's just reassuring them that this is a perfectly normal reaction. And I guess too, I sort of think about it now, I go, well, I guess it demonstrated to her too, when sometimes it gets too much, you need to call people that you love and say, come and sit with me, and this is what I need right now. And sort of not, I can probably tend to go it alone, but obviously knew when enough was enough too. But I thought that would have been a really interesting thing for her to observe. But I felt it was really important to actually pull her aside and just say, I know that you must be concerned and worried, but I will be okay. I've just got to feel this all, get it all out. I'm going to be okay.
Oh, Jo, you sound like such a wonderful mum, and such a wonderful role model as well. You know, I kind of always come back to, our children don't do as we say, they do as we do. And, you know, I very strongly believe we have to model the behavior, the values, the belief systems that we want them to hold in life, and to show them that it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be happy, it's okay to ask for help, it's okay to be angry. You know, it's just how we deal with all that stuff, isn't it? And just having those open conversations with them, just trying, because it's, you know, God, I feel so sorry for kids these days, the world they're growing up in, with social media, and, you know, the pressures that they have on them, and especially if they've been through trauma as well, and they already feel like they don't quite fit in with everyone. And, you know, my girls always say, whenever they bring up their dad, people go a bit weird around them, and it's like a tumbleweed moment of everyone's like, oh God, she talks about dad, what do we say, what do we do? So they just don't bother. And it's like, oh God, there's no escape from anything. You know, when I was a kid, you know, you come home and that was it, you have a break from your friends and life, and it's social media is great. You know, I wouldn't be sat here having the conversation with you if it wasn't for social media. So I think it's a brilliant thing, but it also is a very damaging thing for kids, and they are growing up in a difficult world, and trying to teach them I don't know, how to be true to themselves and not to immerse themselves too much into that and the comparison side of things.
And I think extra hard for us too, I think, as single parents.
Yes. Yeah.
Like we're in charge of this to a certain age. Like it's just such an overwhelming responsibility at times that, you know, I've become better at not second guessing myself as much, but still, God, there's a lot that goes on in my brain going, am I doing this right? And also that fear of going, this loss for them, how will this impact them in the long run? Now, look, it may not at all. Who knows? And often my psychologist says to me, Jo, stop thinking about this because it's not the future just yet. Just calm down. But I'd be lying if I said there's not always a little part of my brain that's going, oh my goodness, does this mean she'll turn to drugs? Will she be in bad relationships? Because it's frightening, and it's hard for people, I think, to understand that they're not going through these overwhelming responsibility and thoughts that we have, especially when it comes to our children.
So hard. It just, you know, and I'm often saying to my children, like, I don't know. I wish I had all the answers for you, but I don't. Like, honestly, like, you think I'm somebody that knows everything, and equally when I have to say no to them and they get really cross with me, it's that I'm not trying to be horrible to you. I want you to be a good person, and I want to keep you safe, and it's all on me. And if, you know, I haven't got anyone to go to help me, and maybe I shouldn't have. Sometimes I think, do I say too much to them? But I don't know, I'm just all for honesty and transparency, and trying to help them see that, I don't know, it's not easy.
Well, and I think your relationship shifts when you've been through something like this. So I would say, whilst Heidi is my daughter, it's a different relationship perhaps to what my friends have with their daughters, because I think she's my daughter. We're roommates. I mean, she sleeps in my bed still. I did say the other day, I was like, you still be sleeping in my bed till you're 18? I said, probably. Which will be interesting. But she's like a roommate. She's also like a best friend, kind of sounding board. So the relationship does shift because we say it's just the two of us, and we're rattling around. And so probably conversations I'd have with Craig, I'll sometimes probably have with her, or just be, I don't know, feeding things out of my brain, and her just going, oh yeah, that sounds good, or whatever it is. So she's probably, but that's probably, I just think, the relationship you end up having, because it's you and your kids. It's different.
And I think you view them differently. And I totally agree, because I have conversations with my children sometimes. I think, oh, should I be having this conversation? Like, you're my child, I'm a parent, I don't know. But actually, they really speak some sense sometimes. Like, they'll say something back to me, and I'm like, God, yeah, that's actually a really good point. Thank you. And you almost become like a team, don't you? That you, like, before it was like parents and children, whereas now I feel like it's like a team, and we come together and respect each other's opinions and thoughts. And I don't know. Yeah, it's weird, but I think they step up as well. That especially my eldest, she's really kind of, I could really see that shift in her, like almost wanting to kind of step up and help and take that, which breaks your heart, because you think, I don't want you to feel like you have to do that, but actually it's
that all empowerment to you at the same time. Like it is, it's like that fostering that independence at the same time, because sometimes I go, there's an element of me that just wants Heidi to stay little forever and just protect and nurture, and then there's another side of me that's like, you get out there, girl, and give it all you got. So it's I don't know, I think it's just an interesting dynamic and change and shift in relationship, and same thing, sometimes in good ways, sometimes in bad ways, but I definitely feel like Heidi and I are more of a team than anything, because we've sort of had to be.
100%. That's the way it goes, isn't it? So in all of this, Jo, in your loss, in your widowhood, what would you say has been your biggest learning? What have you learned about yourself, maybe, that you didn't know before, that is really given to you, that you've taken away?
Oh, that's a big question. I tell you what, I'm a lot stronger than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I think same thing, because sometimes I think, I can't think of that quote right now, but it's like that, I'm so fragile but really strong at the same time too. But I think if you ever had have said to me, 10 years ago, this is what will happen to your life, do you think you can get through that? I would have been like, no way. And if someone had even just said you're a strong kind of character, I would have said, no, I'm pretty meek and mild. Like it's that I feel strong. Like I think I've built a really incredible inner strength that I think that's come from the experiences that I've had, and that then has built an inner confidence and inner faith, and I think that would be the big shift for me.
But really that understanding that you can do and live with so much more than you ever thought that you'd be able to, and come out still, still smiling.
Absolutely. Still smiling.
What would you go back and say to your younger self, that Jo in the very early days, that was desperately searching for answers and wanting to solve all the pain she was in, for where you are now and everything that you've been through? What would be your sort of words of wisdom to that early widowed Jo?
I think for me, I just wish someone had said to me, and I remember hearing this in time, that was just, you're doing the best you can. And I was so hard on myself so many times, not realizing I was just doing the best I could in the incredibly challenging circumstances I was in. And I think we don't often give ourselves credit to go, what is happening right now is bad, and it's as bad as you think, and it hurts and it's painful. So whatever you can do, whether that's just getting out of bed, making yourself a cup of coffee, maybe putting a load of washing on, and often you'd sit back and go, I haven't done enough for the day, I should be more productive, whatever it is. You're just doing the best you can, whatever the circumstances. That's kind of as simple as it is, and kind of taking the pressure off in that sense. So I
love that. I think it's so important, and it's it's an exercise I kind of work through in my group as well, that we're very much looking ahead, aren't we, of thinking, I need to do this, I need to do that, I've got this going on, I've got to make these calls, I've got to solve this problem, and thinking I haven't done it, and just that feeling of not being in control, not being productive, not doing things well enough, rather than going, do you know what, I have done this, I'm going through something huge, traumatic and painful, and I got out of bed and I made a cup of tea and I got the kids to school, I fed the dog, whatever. You kind of go, when you're feeling that horrendous, that's enough. Like, they're big achievements, they're big wins, and it's kind of recognizing that, rather than thinking about everything you should be doing or could have done. Like, just
absolutely. And I think that even applies, even if you're 3 years down the path and you've found yourself in that deep dark hole again, that you just go, right now I'm just doing the best that I can, the best I can, and this is some pretty bad circumstances, and I'll work it out, but this is it for now.
We give ourselves such a hard time, don't we?
We do.
Such a hard time. It's like, let's just be a bit kinder to ourselves. So you've created this wonderful book, which for those of you watching on YouTube will see, Grief, a Guided Journal, which is just absolutely beautiful. There's so much in here. There's so many words of wisdom. It really gets you thinking about you, who you are, your person, who they are, thinking about gratitude, about being kind to yourself, connecting with people, connecting with your loved one, music, like food, looking after you. There's so much in here, and it's educational. It really is brilliant, because I think, like you say, it's hard to talk about what you're feeling sometimes with people, isn't it? And if you're able to put it into words, and keep that for yourself, is such a gift. What prompted you to write this?
Look, I think, Karen, it was interesting. I think, when we were talking about before, I guess, was I searching for stories and the answer of, other widows? And yes, definitely I was, but I clicked on pretty soon enough that I was like, oh, this is reading other people's experiences, but right now, what about my own? And I just didn't feel like there was really anything that that was out there that allowed me to explore my own grief in writing. And so, look, it came to me, it's coming up almost about 2 years since I released the grief journal, but I just really wanted to create a safe space where someone could just come to that journal, pick it up, choose a writing prompt, and just go, I'm just going to lay it all out with no judgment, no positive platitudes, whatever it might be, and explore different sides of themselves. And I guess in a way, and I probably hadn't thought at the time, it becomes a bit of a keepsake of your grief journey. Like, I think now, if I had that journal at year one, and what I would have written compared to writing now would be really different. But what a great way to then reflect back on. And I often do reflect back on things that I had written. I enjoy writing and find it quite therapeutic in year one, and go, well, interestingly, I'll be either like, one, wow, look how far you've come, and feel really proud of it. Equally, sometimes I go, oh, wow, that's still really raw. Like, that's, and I think it's a great way to let it all out, but then also to be able to reflect on it too. And so it becomes a bit of a keepsake. And I just find with journaling too, and especially with a book like this, that you can kind of go, I'm going to pop it on the shelf for 6 months, but then I might bring it back out when I'm in the mood for writing. So it doesn't have to be completed all at once, and it doesn't have to be done in any kind of order. It just can be whatever you're feeling at whatever kind of time. But I think hopefully I've written it in a way that really speaks to people that are grieving, and, you know that I understand that pain and I really get it. And I think that was the thing for me too. I just wanted the book to be nurturing and to just say to someone, I understand, I get it, trust me, pour it all out.
And that totally shines through in the book, the way you write, and even that the things you talk about and what you get people to write about is just like, wow. I mean, you know, one of the questions, who were you? You know, like, you've got to go through this to know to ask that question. And what you say there about losing yourself in grief, and you know, writing about who you were and introducing that. That's just so powerful. It's so powerful.
Well, and I was thinking, so funnily enough, I think, you know, as I was saying, when you hit hurdles in grief, and what had happened was, it was lockdown, and I had hit another mental hurdle where I was emotional and all over the place. And I thought I'd been thinking about this journal for a little bit, and I think the concept was in my mind, but I just didn't know how to write. I think I felt too far away from my grief at that time. Whereas when I'd hit this grief hurdle, I was so close to it that I was like, now's the time to write, because I'm in it with enough experience to kind of know that, you know, things will be okay, and to be able to nurture someone through it, but to also be like, I feel really close to this, and I understand all the emotions and the intensity of what is happening.
Amazing, and such a gift. And God, I wish I'd had it in my early days. You know, you're like, oh I wish I did too. I know, but people can now. So I'll put the link to this in the show notes for people. But where, you know, for those listening, where can they find it?
Yeah, so they can find that on my website, which is at jobetz.com.au. So brilliant. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
We'd love people to check it out.
That is a beautiful gift to yourself or to someone you know that is grieving. And it is not actually just for widows, is it?
No. No, so it's just grief for anyone, whether that's parents, siblings, grandparents, whatever it might be.
Yeah, because writing is very cathartic, very therapeutic, and actually very healing.
It really is.
You know, I've had clients that have some amazing breakthroughs through journaling. It's an incredibly powerful tool. So that's brilliant. But Jo, honestly, I could sit here and talk to you. Genuinely, I could sit here and talk to you for hours. I'm not.
I feel exactly the same, Karen. I'm like, your poor listeners will be going, at what point is Jo going to be quiet?
Stop talking. It'll be a podcast episode used as a sleep meditation. It goes on for so long. No, it's been wonderful. You are always so delightful to talk to. You share so much from the heart, from your own story, and it's always so open and honest and vulnerable but strong. And I think so many are going to resonate with it. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your time with us and your story. So thank you so much, Jo. It's been an absolute pleasure and a delight. So thank you.
Always a delight speaking with you, Karen, and thank you. I'm so appreciative of your time.
Thank you.